Hi, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for coming out in the weather and with the traffic and everything. My name's Jolene Guerrero. I'm with LA County Public Works. And just to explain the format of today's meeting, there's going to be a couple of speakers with CalRecycle, with Department of Insurance, and CalOES. And then there'll be a time for questions and answers. And then after that, there's people available at the tables for one-on-one conversations for your individual questions. Before I introduce the first presenter, I wanted to make sure everyone's aware of our website, the countywide website. It's lacounty.gov/LA County Recovers. And there's a lot of good information that's being updated constantly. One recent addition is we've updated the rebuilding part of the toolkit. And it really lays out the step-by-step process for doing your permitting for the rebuilding. And also, for those of you who live in unincorporated county, the Calabasas Building and Safety Office is bringing on additional staff and created a one-stop concierge service. So they'll be able to walk you through the permitting process, because truthfully, there's various permits that need to be done, and we want to consolidate it and make the process as easy as possible. And then I also wanted to share that Public Works is very closely monitoring weather reports. We've prepared whatever we can for the upcoming storms, and we're continuing to monitor as there are mudslides into our roadways. We'll clean them up as quickly as possible. But I also want to encourage all the residents to make sure you're protecting your private property. You've put up erosion control devices and sandbags, and you're redirecting storm and debris flow away from your buildings. If you want information, if you want some engineering advice, the county does offer that for free, and we'd be happy to go to your property and talk you through suggestions on where to divert flows. And then if you haven't done already, I encourage you to sign up for Alert LA, and that tells you as quickly as possible in whatever format, text or email, about necessary evacuations. Public Works also has an e-notify system, which can give you updates on where we're concerned about potential debris flows, what we're predicting. So the e-notify system is another avenue for getting information. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. It's Marcus Santiano to talk about debris removal, and he's with CalRecycle.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. We're going to open up this PowerPoint really quick. I'm more of a visual person, so I thought I'd develop a PowerPoint so you guys can kind of see our day-to-day operations. So we'll go ahead and get that started in a minute. It's on another one. Sorry.
Yeah, let me finish on it.
Thank you. And then I'll just cue when to switch over. So my name is Marcus Santiano. I'm with CalRecycle. I'm the operations chief for the Woolsey Hill operation. So we'll be managing the day-to-day operations, making sure the operations runs as smooth and safe as possible. So go ahead. And then, sorry, there's a few to keep clicking through. So this is our 21st debris removal event. Probably the more recent one that's relevant to you guys would be the Thomas fire that happened down in Ventura. So we had about 700 properties down there that we cleaned back in June 2018. It was definitely a successful cleanup. And in addition to the Woolsey fire, we're also doing the Camp Fire up in Butte. So that one has about 14,000 structures, but just so you guys aren't worried, our prime focus, our team down here, is Woolsey Hill, and we have another team up in Camp, so we're going to be tag teaming both of those together, and I mean, our main focus is down here, so we'll make sure that gets done, and definitely support you guys on that. So our mission, we're here to help rebuild a community. That's just kind of what we do. We want to rebuild, clean, get you guys back on your feet, so you guys can start over, and definitely. So we've had numerous success with all of our fire cleanups. I personally, this will be my 8th incident. I started this back in 2015. So unfortunately, I mean, this 2015, it's been kind of a constant fire incident. So yeah, I apologize. So we have operating and oversight principles. Our 3 main ones are safety, documentation, and communication. So safety, we ensure that our crews, residents, and the community are all safe during and after our operation. So we do have mandatory meetings with our crews at least once a week in addition to their daily tailgating meetings, and there we hammer on all safety topics. Two main ones we definitely focus on are dust control and safe driving. Dust control, we're going to be having crews to keep things wet and watered down so you guys don't have to worry about airborne particulates. Safe driving is definitely a big one because we'll have all these large 10-wheeler trucks driving around, so we always ensure safe driving, safe speeds, all that, because you guys are definitely important, and we would not want to burden you guys any more than you already are. So we do have like a zero tolerance traffic safe driving measure. So go ahead. As far as phase one, that had to do with the US EPA with toxics. So as far as phase one goes with hazardous waste removal, that's about 95% done. So we should be rolling into our phase two debris removal. So this is where we kind of start our program, and I'll just go over kind of how our process goes from step A to the last step. So sorry, go ahead and go back really quick. No, you're fine. So this is just kind of a before and after picture just to kind of give you an expectation of kind of what things look like when we're done. You have just the community down here, and then this is kind of what these lots look like when we're done. You just have nice, smooth lots left over with no debris. And this is kind of touching on the importance of the program itself. So the participation in the program is optional, but just know that any private cleanups, they still have to kind of meet the same standards that we have in place. And we do really encourage joining the program because as far as cost goes, the only cost that we really take for this program just comes out of a small bit of your insurance, which Dave will touch upon a little bit more later. And for those that don't have insurance, it's free to them. So we really encourage ROE signups, and that way we're here to clean these lots and at little to no cost to you guys. So go ahead. So as far as our whole debris removal process, these are the multiple steps that take place. We start with our right of entry submittal all the way to a final inspection. And just to kind of give you guys an idea, this process takes place over several weeks, so it's not like it gets done in a day. So this is one thing will take a few days, and depending on other aspects, it could take several weeks to get done, but it will get done eventually. So we'll start with our right of entry submittal. So ROEs, go ahead. So ROEs are what grants us permission to actually come onto your property and start the debris removal process. The other important thing this document does is that it lets you put any details about your property that you kind of want us to know, whether it's like locations of your wells and septic, if you note anything you guys want to save or have us crews try to look for. That kind of motivates our crews a little bit too, because they do want to make you guys as happy as possible, and when they know they need to look for something or want to try and find something for you guys, it kind of gets them going and they get really excited about it. And then other things to note are things like lock gates, and then we ask that you guys be as specific as possible, and like drawings are definitely helpful, but it's just a really informative document, and we use this constantly throughout the process. So go ahead, next slide. So our next step, so here's an example. So things that they note in the ROE for us to look for. So this is just one example of an incident. We found this person's coin collection that our crews were able to dig up and clean, and anything we find, we try and either set aside or bring it into the D-Rock and have for you guys available. There's also one other picture, just some other items that we come across as our crews are digging and doing their labor. So we don't find things all the time, but when we do, and any little thing helps usually is what we found out with homeowners. So as far as the next step goes, our site assessment team, so this is our assessment and monitoring crews. These guys will be arriving on Monday, and we'll be starting site assessments as early as Tuesday. So just as a forewarning, if you see anyone in white Tyveks walking around, that's kind of showing that we're starting our process. So don't be alarmed, and we're just putting them right to work as soon as we can. But usually what they do is they do site maps of the drawings. They look at the initial property boundaries, note any debris that's around the site, vehicles, things like that. They'll take photos for documentation purposes. I guess this helps with insurance also, in addition to just kind of giving us an outlook of what the property looks like before and what kinds of things we're going to have to do to get it cleaned up. So go ahead and do the next slide. So after the site assessment, they also do an asbestos assessment. So they're looking for any asbestos-containing material that's on site. The reason for this is that before we can mobilize a debris removal crew, we have to do some kind of asbestos assessment first to see if there's any asbestos on site. So if they don't find any, we can schedule you guys for debris removal right away. But if there is asbestos found, then we have to schedule you for an asbestos abatement. And that's just another type of cleanup that takes place prior to actual debris removal. So in this case too, you'll see, we may be tipping chimneys over because the flue can sometimes contain asbestos-containing material. So we may be dropping chimneys prior to debris starting. So you may see that happening, but if not, you'll probably see more of it starting around the 28th when our crews start mobilizing. So as far as the abatement goes, if there is abatement needed, we have a crew that goes in and removes any asbestos-containing material. They bag it and haul it to a Class 3 landfill that is permitted to accept asbestos waste. And once we have a certified asbestos consultant that goes in and clears the property, so once we actually clear it, we'll schedule you right in for debris. So as far as debris removal goes, 28 to 48 hours in advance, you'll be called by one of our staff. And so they'll let you know when we schedule you in, when our crews will be mobilizing. And one thing you can do is we allow homeowners to be present for the debris removal, and we actually encourage that if possible. And one thing we usually do is we have our contractor and we have a task force leader who leads that crew, but we allow the homeowner to do a site walk of the entire property and go over any things you guys might want to keep, and that way just everyone's on the same page and kind of knows what to expect when we actually start the removal process. As far as the actual process itself, we start by removing things like metal. Next step is removing all the ash and debris, and next is concrete. So any concrete foundations we'll be removing. And next, after concrete, we remove about 3 to 6 inches of soil to make sure all the contamination's gone. And all these materials get something called burrito wrapped for at least the ash, debris, and soil. It's just a safer way of transporting these materials on these trucks, and they're also tarped. So we have safe measures put in place to transport this material from the property to the proper disposal facility. And as far as the process itself, before any of our staff considers these actually complete, we do something called a site walk. And what that entails is not only does the debris crew, but their task force leader and my operations staff, we walk up and down the property trying to find things even like nails and glass, because we want to make sure these lots are actually clean prior to actually signing them off and moving them through the process. So one thing I did with a couple crews I was friendly with, I would bet them that if I found more than a handful of material, they would owe me like a drink, like a Gatorade or something. But if I found less than a handful, then I would have to buy them something. So most of the time with that expectation, I actually lost that bet several times. So these guys do great work, and they take pride in their work, and they want to make sure they leave you guys with these nice clean lots. As far as the concrete, the reason why we remove concrete is that it changes composition once it reaches temperatures above 300 degrees. It not only leaves contamination issues, but it also does this, like problems with the structural integrity of the concrete itself. And the average wildfire temperature is about 800 to 1200 degrees Celsius, so well over that 300 limit. So that's why we really emphasize the removal of concrete on this project. So these are just, I'm gonna put just a couple pictures of all the equipment you guys might be seeing on these cleanups. So the main one we generally use on these is an excavator. So these are the guys that do most of the work for the removal. Next we have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with skid steers, like bobcats. So these guys, sometimes you'll see a crew with a skid steer and an excavator, and they do all the like consolidation and removal of the debris. Next we have, so our debris trucks, we generally use these 10-wheelers. We may use other trucks depending on access and the need to remove different types of material. So water, I emphasized water as part of safety. So we do community watering, and we'll probably start that as early as next week also with our assessment team. But what these guys do is make sure the dust stays in control. And even before these properties start debris removal, we still have these trucks going through communities, wetting down these properties as a way to keep that dust down before we can schedule those for debris removal. So we're still maintaining dust control in those cases. And each task force crew that we have has their very own water truck on site, because they will not do any type of work without some type of water source as our way of maintaining dust control the entire time throughout the cleanup. So they either use things like water trucks or these portable water machines called water buffaloes. So next we have lowboys quite a bit. So these are the giant trucks that'll be hauling our excavators throughout the neighborhood. So when we have to mobilize to a new site, you may see these larger vehicles around and seeing excavators transporting to and from other properties. We also do street sweeping. So with all the water we use, we do create sometimes dust, and not dust, but mud on roads. So we have street sweepers put in place to keep the roads clean as we're doing cleanup. So we do everything we can to maintain safe and operations and not try to inconvenience you guys too much. So once debris is actually removed, that's when we start moving into our soil sampling process. So generally when we sign off on a property as complete for debris, usually next day we'll have a crew out there taking soil samples, and the number of samples they take is going to depend on the size of the debris area, and these get sent to a lab for analysis, and those are typically a 1 to 2 week turnaround time. So that's kind of where I was saying where the process may take several weeks. So as far as debris goes, you may have a site that maybe takes 1 to 3 days for removal and another couple weeks for those sample results to come back in. But if those samples meet our cleanup goals that we put in place, then we can schedule you for our erosion control process. If those samples don't come back clean, then we have to do something called a rescrape. And so what a rescrape is that we mobilize a crew back on the property, and depending on where that sample failed, we'll have to take a little bit more soil out. So we usually mobilize another skid steer, a water truck, and another crew to get that extra little bit of soil out, and then we'll take a resample and keep doing that until we can get those samples to come back clean. So once those come back clean, that's where we kind of move into our erosion control process. So really quick, so these are the metals that we test for in our soil analysis, and we have these cleanup goals that they have to meet. So those usually just depend on these other samples that we take. So we tend to hit on arsenic and lead quite a bit on the samples that do fail, but those are the ones we see more common. But so as far as the erosion control, we install erosion control in areas that we disturb during our removal. So we'll use things like hydraulic mulch, fiber rolls, and things like jute net or erosion control blankets. As far as hydro mulch goes, we just want to make sure everyone's aware. It's a wood-based mulch with tackifier. We're not actually involved because we're not using seed, because the word hydroseed and hydro mulch kind of get interchanged quite a bit. So we want to make it very clear that we're not using hydroseed, we're using a mulch-based material. So we will not be introducing any kind of seeds into the mix. Once erosion control is installed, that's when we can kind of queue you guys up for our final inspection. But this is just a picture. So a hydro mulch truck. So these are the kind of devices we use to spread that material around the property. And the next picture, this is an example of what a finished lot would look like. So you have a couple fiber rolls put in place with a nice layer of hydro mulch, and the erosion control blankets come into place if we disturb any type of slopes, which depending on the areas which I've seen, we may have to do that to quite a few, but either way we'll get that type of material installed and we'll get it done right. So as far as a final site walk goes, when those properties are finished with erosion, that's when we can actually send a person out for a final inspection. So they'll just note that we actually did the debris removal, your samples came back clear, what type of erosion control did we install, and then any other observations. So if we left items that you guys wanted to save, set aside, but we're basically photo documenting and noting like how we're leaving the material or how we're leaving the property before we close it out. But when we finish this, sorry, go ahead. When we finish this inspection, we send this form over to the county for approval, and that's what closes you guys out of our program and turns it over to the county, so that's can be used in order to get your building permit. So, so that was our. I know I threw a lot of information out at you, but feel free. We'll have a Q&A period if you guys need any more details. As far as scheduling properties go, we just wanted to make everyone aware that those that sign up and qualify for the program, we will clean your property. And we do take priority sites into consideration. So the big one is any areas where there's schools or hospitals and there's debris. We'll tend to focus on those areas. We'll also focus on areas where we have a lot of ROEs in place, because for operationally, it makes sense to be able to knock out more properties at once if all of them are available. We also put crews everywhere, so we're not focusing just on one area. We're going to be spreading our crews out throughout both the Woolsey and the Hill areas, because we want to make sure we have a presence and get everyone clean as soon as possible. Let me just talk a little bit about our staff. So I'm the operations chief. We have Kendra Boyer from OES. She's our incident commander, so she'll be leading the operation. She'll have a deputy, Tim Smith, who I believe is finishing up another meeting we have down a little ways. And Pauline Totten, she'll be our plans chief. She's currently working right now, getting things ready for next week. I wanted to mention Pauline. So I met Pauline in Mariposa when we did the Detweiler fire. So she was our county worker back then, and since then she joined OES and Cal Recycle and has started these cleanups herself, because to her, she's representing her community, and everything we did for her, she wants to do for you guys and everyone else that has been, this kind of thing has happened to. So we're all really passionate, and we all want to help you guys get back and go back to living a comfortable life. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand things over to Dave, who will start talking about the insurance. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Edwards. I'm the Bureau Chief of the Claims Services Bureau. My team is responsible for responding to wildfires throughout the state or any other disasters or insurance claim issues. On behalf of the department, Commissioner Lara, our condolences are with you, and we're going to do everything we can do from our side to help out. You might want to look at our website, insurance.ca.gov. We have an entire page dedicated to resources for wildfire survivors. We have 10 top tips that address all kinds of issues. We have a hotline. It's Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5, that insurance experts available that you can call, get answers to any insurance questions whatsoever. Additionally, we have a process where you can file a request for assistance with our office that will then trigger an insurance expert, one of my compliance officers, who would look at issues with the handling of your claim specific to an incident you may have. We will also probably be having workshops in the area in the next month or so, in the next couple of months, that'll be able to meet and assist you further. In regards to this program, the department encourages people to participate and to complete the right of entry and use this program. Here's how it works. The cost per lot for this degree of cleanup runs well over $80,000, okay? There's generally two types of insurance policies that people have. One is a policy where there's a dedicated percentage or amount that's for debris removal. Usually that'll be something like your coverage A, which is to rebuild your dwelling. There'll be 10% available for debris removal, or 5%, or a dedicated amount, $10,000, $20,000. If you participate in this program, at some point, LA County will have a bill ready. They'll have an invoice ready. It's going to take some time. But if you're in the program, whatever dedicated debris removal money your insurance policy has, that's what LA County will settle for, and you're done. If you have $20,000 worth of coverage and the bill's $110,000, they get the $20,000 and you're done. If the other type of policy is one where the debris removal is within your limits. There's no dedicated amount. There's no set specific percentage. There's no amount. It just, you have $300,000, $400,000 available to rebuild, but it doesn't mention debris removal. What's going to happen in this program if you sign up, all of your money goes first towards rebuilding your home. If there's any money left over at the end of that process, the county could then have access to leftover money to reimburse them for the cost of this cleanup. If all the money is spent on rebuilding, then you're done. So that's a great benefit. The right of entry form also has an assignment of benefits process, a form where you assign your benefits. That gives the right for LA County to actually just call your insurance company. They may deal directly with your insurance company and you may never even know about it. They can deal directly with your insurance company. You authorize your insurance company to speak with them, to communicate with them, and that can work out quite well for you. I would suggest, if you participate in the program, that you do let your insurance company know, we're going to participate in the Consolidated Debris Removal Program, so that they're just aware and can document their file so they could either expect a call from the county or expect to hear from you at some point when the county's invoice is ready. Now, sometimes an insurance company will just go ahead and pay you the debris removal limits. Let's say you have a policy with $20,000 available. They may just cut you a check and say, this is for debris removal. Please hang on to that money, because at some point when the county wants to square up with you, you'll want to have that available, because that'll be deemed as this is for the debris removal. Now, LA County does a really spectacular thing, and they may address, that could be addressed if there's any questions. Let's say there's some debris that's not part of this program that Cal Recycle doesn't collect. Trees, boulders, things like that. They'll actually, you can use debris removal money to remove that debris, save the receipts, and when LA County comes to talk to you about the reconciliation, those receipts will count towards debris removal money. That's a tremendous benefit as well. So we will have question and answers available, or question time here available. Kendra with Cal OES will take it from here.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dave. As Dave said, my name is Kendra Boyer. I'm with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. I am the incident commander for the state-run debris removal program. As I'm sure you guys have all heard many, many times, we do offer, from me personally, as well as from the Governor's Office, we want to wish our condolences for your loss. But we are here to try to help you make this recovery process as painless and as streamlined as possible. So that's why we are here to answer questions. Marcus and I are able to answer questions about the state-run program. Dave is here to answer your insurance questions. And then we also have Colby Sky here with LA County Public Works to answer any questions you guys may have about the opt-out option, which is the local program that you guys can also choose to do if you want to take that route. So at this time, we're going to open the floor for any questions for us. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry.
I've signed up a couple of times, and I still can't confirm that I'm on the list and that they have my information and they have what they need. Is there any way to confirm that we're on the list and that we're going to have our debris removed?
Yes, yes. So now we have our debris removal operations center will be open starting Monday, and you can come into the operations center and we can check and make sure that we have received your right of entry form. And Colby can also talk about how to find out that information from Public Works directly.
Where is it?
I'm sorry, the debris removal operations center is at 26610 Agora Road in Calabasas.
And just to mention that we also have a dashboard that we're about to post live where you can just enter your address, your APN, or your phone number, and we'll be able to look up your record and it'll tell you the status. confirming that we received it. We'll let you know if there's additional information that we need or that we process that on and sent it to the state.
Is there a place that we can see exactly what the opt-in program does not remove? Because I haven't been getting an answer of swimming pools, retaining walls, anything under 6 inches, because exactly what items, because then even if you opt in, you still need to hire a private contractor to remove all of those items. And again, if you only have a specified amount of insurance, you're going with the county for that same money you need to finish the cleanup. And so in those cases where, one, what are the items exactly that aren't included, and how does that process work? Because if you opt in, you can't be 100% clean without a private contractor anyway. So just trying to understand that situation better.
That's a great question. So we actually have this table over at the Public Works table there. It's a list that shows everything that is and isn't included. Generally, if you qualify for the program, there's really only 3 things that aren't covered. Pools will not be removed, fences and trees. Everything else, including foundations, will be removed. If you've got retaining walls, that generally isn't included as well, but is not. But just about everything else, if it's related to your structure. So the intent of this program is anything related to your structure that was burned will be removed, if that helps. So we're going to wait until the very end of the rebuilding process. What we're going to do is we'll have the debris removed, we'll have an invoice ready, and we're going to have you complete anything else, use your insurance proceeds. So let's say you have fencing that was burned that wasn't taken out by this program. Use those insurance proceeds to take care of that. Send us the receipt that shows this is what I spent for that, I used my insurance proceeds for that. That'll be deducted from anything that we collect that goes back to the program.
That'll include pools. What about piles? If you have like 18, 20-foot piles, you've got a dozen of them. They're going way deep into the ground and they have to be removed. You'd be able to take all that out.
So generally, we'd like to keep the piles.
Contractor took it out, you could get that back before the state takes the rest of the money.
That's a good question. We'll have to double check that because generally the piles you'd probably want to keep if they're still usable to rebuild from, unless they were damaged for some reason.
Because I think this program won't take out the piles.
Right.
I understand that. I'm more worried about if you assign your policy to the county and the county's now negotiating with your insurance company without you even knowing about it. At the end of the day, how do you know anything's even left there? Because you're going to have to do the initial cleanup before you can even get in and do that secondary work.
Yeah. And let me kind of clarify something I said earlier. On the assignment of benefit, it allows the county to talk to your insurance company. We had a situation in another event years ago without that language. And insurance companies, rightfully so, were not talking to that county, saying, the county's asking, well, what are the limits available? We're not going to tell you because our policyholder hasn't allowed us to talk to you. So really the clarification on the assignment of benefit is it allows communication now. You're allowing your insurance company to talk to the county. But you will be in the loop on this process. So when I talk about them, that wasn't fully accurate about them talking to your insurance company without you. You'll know. You will know what's going on. So to answer your question, if you have piles and you feel they need to be removed, then the way the county's approaching it now is any money you spend on debris removal, keep the receipts, and that will count as an offset towards anything they would want to collect.
Yes.
Because in this case, it's not that the pool itself looked like anything was wrong, but the heat expanded the bond beam. And
Yes.
the pool has to be taken out, which was unexpected.
Yeah, and you'll see on this table it shows that pools are not included. That means if you use the funding from your insurance to cover the pool removal, we'll deduct that amount from anything that we would collect.
Sorry, one last question. I don't mean to monopolize, but so even on the opt-in program for a specified amount of insurance, you don't collect until after the rebuild so that we have a chance to put all of that information in, or how does that?
At least after all of the debris removal steps are included. So clearly you'd want to remove the pool before you start the rebuild process. So we'll wait until that time before we collect.
Okay, so one last thing. For anybody that got their money initially, as you
Yes.
discussed, and they're setting that money aside and holding it. A lot of times, they're not sure if they're gonna, and let's say there's 100,000 and your work is 60,000 of it, and they've only done about 20, because they're worried, how far am I gonna go over, and how is this really gonna work out? Is there a way for you guys to give an estimate for your work, or does that not happen?
No, there's
It is very difficult to give the estimate, but you get paid first. That's the primary principle. So whatever it is that it takes for you to rebuild, including any debris removal, you're going to pay that from your insurance proceeds first. If there's anything left over, that will be collected so that there's not a duplication of benefits. If there's nothing left over, that is perfectly fine. Our goal is remove the debris in a safe way, help you to rebuild.
And the time frame, what we've seen historically, the time frame between the debris removal work being done and a final invoice and the county contacting someone is closer to years than months. You know, it's a year and a half, couple of years. So you'll know pretty well where you stand before the county ever reaches out to you.
Thanks. Got a question in the back. Yes.
So my question really follows up onto both of your questions because I just want 100% clarification that if you have trees or things like that removed, you don't have to have them removed before, if you opt into this program, before you do it in order to qualify, because I don't want any issue between like insurance and this and like, well, you know, you didn't spend it first and so therefore then they collect the money and then you're left hanging with that. So I just wanted to clarify that you can still use your own insurance money to pay for like trees and other things that are not covered, even if they clear your property before you do that, right? Am I right about that?
That is correct. And the only
Thank
thing
you.
I'd say about trees is when the crews are coming to the site, they'll look to see if there are any trees that may potentially create a hazard for the crews that are out there. If that's the case, they will take those trees down and set them aside. The goal is to keep them out of the ash footprint so that they don't get contaminated. And then later on, it'll be your responsibility to remove those trees.
Just one more question. I had a tornado go through my house, and it tossed everything all over 2 acres. Are they going to go through and pick up everything that's spread out, or do I have to move that onto the site?
Were those items impacted by the fire or not?
Well, yeah. I mean, they were. I mean,
were all burnt.
There's burnt wood. There's everything you can imagine.
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, we do remove burned items, even if they are not just in the footprint of where your home was. The point of this program is to remove the hazard for you. We don't just clean up where the home is and leave everything else on the property. In some of our previous cleanups, we've had acres and acres and acres of buildings and things like that that we do remove. We do not remove, as you mentioned earlier, fences, but as what you're talking about, if you have parts of your home that have been spread around the property and various buildings, outbuildings, things along those lines that have been burned, we do remove those. We don't just stick to where your home was.
Okay, I have a question. I haven't heard any time frame. I know on opting out, we're at March 15th. Is that county time, or if we opt in, is that somewhere near that, or are we a year away, or what's going to happen there?
So currently our deadline to opt into the state program is January 28th. January, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it'll be done. Oh, okay. Sorry. Right now, our goal is to have the debris cleaned up by the end of April. Depending on how quickly we get a right of entry forms. That's why these meetings are so important, to try to let the community know about this program. If we don't have the right of entry forms in, we can't perform the debris removal. So we still have quite a few property owners who have not opted in or out of the program. So that's what we're hoping these outreaches will let people know about what we're doing so that they can come in and sign up for the program.
Can I add to that too? Of course. So just to really stress that, we've had roughly a third of the property owners that have been impacted opt in for this program. And I know some folks like to wait until the last minute. There are folks that don't file their taxes until April 15th. But we've already started sending the right of entries that we've received onto the state so they can start planning out. So the sooner you submit those right of entry forms, the sooner they can start mapping out, clearing your site, and then scheduling it for removal. We want to encourage you to get that rebuilding process started. So please do submit those. Don't wait until the 28th. If you're on the fence, you can always go back, give us more information. You could come back and say, you know what, I've decided I want to clear my property myself and pull back that right of entry form. But we really do want to encourage as many people as possible to sign up so we can start planning that out and getting the crews out there so they can start clearing your properties.
My question is, it's kind of a reiteration on previous questions, but I have a large hillside lot that's a cut and fill lot, and it's a large concrete slab, and it's built in '68. So if you came and cut out where my house foundation is and say that's good, the rest of it's all around, it's you know, concrete slab and flagstone around it. If when I go to build, now that's compromised or it doesn't have the structural support, now that footprint's been cut out, and I need to take, later on when I find out when a rebuilding process, does that count, does that money, is that still going to have to be done by the deadline, or is that might be farther down the road, but I have to take that foundation out?
So generally the foundations are removed if you opt into this program.
So, but this is a large, so you're not taking the footprint of the house out, you're taking all concrete flat work, whether it had a house on it or not. So
your entire property boundary, if there was concrete, if there was a foundation, and please correct me if I'm correct, if it's part of the structure, it's all going to be. But it's not part of the structure. It's part of the pad. The whole. It's concrete slab, but.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and clarify that for you. So if there is a structure on top of a foundation, we remove it. Right. So your home, garage, outbuildings. Okay. But if you do have a large concrete slab that was not structural, it did not have a building on top of it, we'll saw cut around that so that you can keep patios and walkways and things along those lines. So
when I go to rebuild, they say this concrete this is not up to code anymore because it doesn't have footings or support like it did in '68. What they probably poured it on all kinds of. Now I have to take that all out and compact it again. When I go down the line of building, I might be 6-8 months out, but I realize all this has to go. All my concrete. Now you take out that thing, all my retaining walls now that are on that slab are inadequately supported. Where does the money come from to remove that?
Let me see if I can answer that. So the expectation is, in general, most folks will build on the same footprint, and so the part of the structure where there was any building will definitely be removed, and you'll be doing a whole new foundation in that portion. Yeah. Now the part where, I don't know if you were planning to build, in an expanded area, or if you were just leaving it as an open patio or slab, it shouldn't necessarily need any structural
What about if I have to move my house over because now the fire code makes me put a fire turnaround in it, and I now have to reposition my house where it wasn't before?
So I would suggest, we have someone from our building and safety office. I don't know if you're in the city or in the unincorporated area.
We're in Malibu City.
Okay, so City of Malibu will help guide you through that process. We have someone from the City of Malibu here as well, and that's a case-by-case situation where we're still working through those exact determinations, but we'll have to look at your property and determine, does there need to be an adjustment or not? Can you rebuild in the same footprint? And we'll work with you on that.
And I'll just add, that's when I had mentioned earlier about doing that site walk with our contractor and our task force leader. So you can definitely set something up and we can take a look at your property and actually talk with the person who will be doing the removal. So we can figure that out as we get that started.
Can I ask a question? This is if you choose to opt out of the program and you want to do your debris removal in phases, where you would get all of the ash, the metal, the chimney, things like that off first, but leave your foundation, is there a time limit that you have to get your soils testing in and all of that? Are we looking at a deadline in regards to that?
Yeah, so generally we want that part done by March 15th. And there's an application that we'd like you to submit by the end of this month that lays out that time frame. So that would be helpful to us if you want to do it in phases, if you can explain that in your application.
Okay.
1 second, there's somebody back there first.
I arrived late. I'm sorry if I'm asking
okay.
a question that's already been asked, but I have a couple of questions. First, to follow up on what he asked before. Now, our insurance company came out and they told us that our walkways have also been, which are cement, and outside have also been compromised. Now, you wouldn't remove that even though they've been compromised by the high heat? Is that what you're saying?
It just kind of depends. Those are kind of things we have to do when we actually take a look at the property. So depending on if there's any type of contamination, we may take that kind of thing into consideration. So I can't give you a straight answer right now, but if we want to set up some type of site visit, we can definitely take a look at your property and figure things out from there.
Okay.
That is a note on our
And yes, so that would be
a explanation.
exactly. So
On
if you
the
fill out
opt-in thing, on the
Yes.
opt-in thing, you would put a note like that?
definitely
Okay.
things like that definitely help us when we actually go to the property,
Okay.
and that gives us things to be aware of and what to look at, and
Okay.
so.
And then I have another question. You're saying that what you remove may not be everything that needs to be removed. And from the explanation you gave earlier, I wasn't completely clear on this. We need to remove other stuff that you don't remove. We may not know that until after you've done your removal process, correct? Unless,
Do you want to repeat the basically 3 items that aren't going to be removed?
Yeah, so the big ones are swimming pools, trees, and then and fences, sorry, thank you. So yeah,
okay.
Retaining walls.
retaining.
Slabs are gone, but the retaining wall.
Correct. We only removed the concrete that had a structure above it because that's where all your heat comes from. When the home caught on fire and it sat there for days at 1,200, 800 degrees, that's what makes it unstructurally sound.
Okay.
So that's what we remove.
I understand that. Now, what about like the earth? That's the other thing that the insurance company inspector said, that they would have to remove certain amount of earth because
Soil.
There's so much
Contamination.
Would you do that, or is that something that we would be having to have someone else do?
No, we do. So under where we have removed your foundations, where there was burned structures, we take about 3 to 6 inches of soil from underneath the foundation and perform soil samples on that soil. We don't take 3 to 6 inches of your entire property if there wasn't structures there that burn. But the areas that we do our debris removal is where we sample.
Okay.
And we remove, like I said, 3 to 6 inches. And Marcus can elaborate on the soil sampling and the rescrape process if that were to occur.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll generally take soil samples, and then if those come back hot, so they don't meet our cleanup standards, we have to do something called a rescrape, and that's where we send another crew out, and they take about another 3 to 6 inches of soil just in that area that didn't pass, because you'll have multiple samples throughout your property. So if only certain areas failed, and those are the areas we'll just take a little more soil out. And then we do a resample to make sure they meet those cleanup standards.
Okay, so, sorry for the confusion, but if I opt in, but I also have items that aren't going to be removed, I technically also have to submit a work plan, which the deadline is, because I have to have a private contractor remove those. So do I still have to do that by January 30th and finish by March 15th?
So if you're opting in, you won't necessarily need to go through the full application. So if you only have fencing or a pool, you don't need a full application for that. We require full application for structures that are partially burned, so they're not eligible for this program, or that are completely burned where residents or property owners want to do their own debris removal. That's where we want to have that detailed application, because our goal is to have the same level of cleanup that the state contractors would be doing.
Okay.
Retaining walls.
So retaining walls, are you hoping to keep them or you need them to be removed?
If they're compromised because of the heat, I mean, you'd have to remove them on these giant hillside houses.
Yeah.
So do you have to have a permit in by January 30th?
Or an app.
Of the retaining wall if you're not removing it?
Possibly a permit, and our building and safety folks can work with you to address that question.
The question on the retaining wall. We have a guest house that was built on a retaining wall.
And we have a mic coming over to you.
A guest house that was built on a retaining wall, and we're not going to rebuild the guest house on the same site because we don't, they compromised. But we don't want to remove the retaining wall because it's still retaining the soil. Is that going to be a possibility, or?
It is. So the question is whether the retaining wall is still structurally sound. We recommend that you find a professional that can help you determine that, and hopefully it is, and you can keep it.
What about utilities? I know in the Thomas fire, the county was real proactive on having Edison and gas, telephone, everybody come out and disconnect. So when if you either opt in or opt out, and when someone shows up to remove your property, you're not waiting a month or a week or 5 weeks for gas or Edison. Yep. Are you guys proactive on that? Is it being done right now?
Yes. So we've already reached out to all the utilities, and we've given them notice that before the end of the month they need to make sure that utilities are capped. So before the crews are out there, gas, utility, sewer, water, et cetera, are all capped so that there's no conflict between the debris removal operations and those utilities.
Is that just for the opt-in people or the opt-in and opt-out people?
We give them a complete list of every property that was significantly damaged so that they can cap all the utilities. And you can actually contact us so that we can confirm if your property was on the list or not. It would be helpful to us. There's very few locations where we won't necessarily, let's say your house was behind a gate and we didn't have a full extent of the damage. So we want to make sure that our list is accurate, and that if you do need that utility capping, let us know and we'll confirm it.
And they're going to have that done by the end of the month, you said?
That was our request to utilities, and we'll be getting confirmations from each of them.
Thank you.
I have a question about something you were talking about earlier, slabs, and if you called that a patio, so it's not part of a structure, but we had some patio furniture that was plastic that just melted down into the concrete. So that kind of raises the question, is that going to be removed because it's potentially toxic? Is there a way, I mean, I guess the only way is to find out, is the guys have you come and evaluate it? What's the probability on something like that?
So we do have our crews do their best to try to scrape any plastic that's on the concrete off, scrape it, dust it, or sweep it, or water to get it up as much as we can. If we're unable to, then again it could be a case by case, but typically no. Typically we would still leave
usually that's not considered toxic enough that
correct.
It has to be removed.
Correct.
And I have one other question about if you have say a slab that you've got a cut and fill slope, where a slab is tied to a retaining wall, and the slab would be where a structure was, and removing that ends up, compromising the retaining wall. Is there any way to work to keep that slab, even if it's not going to be used for a building anymore? Or is it basically, is there any way to test for toxicity, or do you assume that if a fire burned above it, that it's toxic and needs to be removed?
Yes. So the answer to that question is that if it is tied into a retaining wall, we would do a saw cut as far out as we needed to help retain the integrity of the retaining wall. And when I say integrity of the retaining wall, it's to retain the soil that's behind the wall, not necessarily for building integrity.
Right.
Yeah. So you probably would have to still replace that retaining wall, but at a later date.
So you'd be saw cutting, you'd be leaving some of the slab, or you'd be going down?
Leaving part of the slab.
Okay. And if that has had something that's burned on top of it, the possibility of toxicity, is that low? Is that cleanable?
For that piece, part of the slab?
Yeah, if you guys
So
leave
the part of the slab, I'm
part
sorry.
of the slab, which is sort of like a horizontal beam for the retaining wall, do you test that for toxicity, or is that usually not the issue? Or
No, we don't test it for toxicity. We don't leave enough of it for it to be built upon. It's
Right.
more just to help retain
Sure,
or keep the
okay.
integrity of the retaining wall.
So you might leave a couple feet,
Correct.
and that gives it some rigidity.
Exactly.
Great.
Correct.
If your slab is staying, and you got, if you're out of the program and your slab is staying, I have an accessory building, a substantial sized one. The slab is going to be saved. So do I just sample the soil on the exterior of that slab?
That's an opt-out question, I think.
So yes, we'll want to have sampling, and we have in our application details about the type of soil testing that's needed and the regimen, for lack of a better term, for how you sample around the property to make sure that it is clean.
Yeah, but you're not going to make me core through my slab, correct? No. So as long as I could prove that the sampling protocol on the exterior of the slab where the soil, where the ash footprint actually touched the soil, that's all you're going to require, correct?
Well, we will also require that the structural integrity of the slab is.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a more important one.
Yeah,
so.
after we clean the slab, then we have a structural engineer come out, tell us whether we could leave it or add to it to make it stay, and then if a structural engineer signs off on that, then we can get our building permit and sign off from the county on our debris cleanup, correct?
Right.
I wanted to find out more, and forgive us for we were late coming in, so this may have been already explained, but if you could talk for a minute about how you will communicate with the people who opt in throughout the program. Like I know you were talking about, you're going to have a portal or something up pretty soon so you can type in your APN or your address or your phone number and then find out, is that the extent of the communication that's going to be going on? I assumed that was only for the paperwork, to make sure that the paperwork had gotten in, but could you walk us through this whole process? And also, do we as property owners have the ability to be nearby while the process is going on?
Yes. So,
yeah, so as far as the whole debris removal process goes, when we actually queue your property up for removal, someone from our staff, whether it's our consultant or our planning staff, will notify you 24 to 48 hours before we mobilize a crew. We do allow you guys to be present on site. We'll just have an exclusion zone where you guys can actually be standing where it's safe and outside of any heavy equipment and potentially hazardous like dust or all that stuff. So that is possible. And generally, so you get the 48 hours notice from our staff, but we also have task force leaders who will be leading our crews from property to property, and they are very good at communicating with homeowners, and they're generally supposed to be notifying them like pretty much as soon as they're ready to mobilize. So you'll get constant updates from either them or our other staff at the D-Rock. And then did you want to add to any?
I just want to add a little bit. So at any point in time, we at the D-Rock will know where you are in the process. So you're welcome to come by the Operations Center or call the Operations Center, and we'll be happy to let you know where you stand in the process at any point in time.
And I would just say, so our hours at the D-Rock, I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but they're going to be 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to noon on Saturdays. And we'll also have a phone number at some point for folks to call in.
I just have two questions. One of the things you reminded me of is in the private contract that's looked at my property, they need to leave the retaining walls in place till just before construction, just to hold the slope, even though they're already compromised. So it's like there's 3 or 4 steps. But you've kind of assured that you're not coming in until the end, because I don't really know what all that's going to cost in each phase till I get through. And I guess the second thing is, for people that have pretty extensive policies, there are all kinds of other things in riders. Is there a way to limit what you're talking to the insurance company about to only the debris portion of the insurance policy?
On your policy, it sounds like you're going to have trees, shrubs, landscape, all kinds of other policies. You want to just be very clear. One of our recommendations, the top 10 tips, you want to put things in writing with your adjuster or the company, and you want to just be very clear about what you're talking about. It's usually in your best interest, and it makes things so much smoother to be in contact with your company and to tell them exactly what you're doing, to tell them exactly where it's going, what you're intending to do. Okay, here's what we're doing. It's going to be multiple phases of debris removal. Some of it's for debris, some of it's for we need the retaining wall held in place. If you let the company know, that's usually the best way to proceed and to make sure there's no miscommunication later on, and just put things in writing to them as well.
Yeah, I think I have that part covered. I'm
Okay.
more concerned when I assign to you. Are you limited to only speaking to them with a portion that pertains to you on the debris? Because I have all kinds of other things, joyrides, things that I don't want anyone else looking at or having anybody have any access to.
Right. On the right of entry form, the counties, it's the county that's going to be dealing with that, not the Department of Insurance of the state. The county's only interest is in the structural debris removal.
But I just like to limit that that's all my insurance company talks to them.
Yeah, that would be.
So, just to repeat, your concern is if you have multiple components of your insurance, you want to make sure the county is only focused on the debris removal portion. That is definitely our intent. And just to reiterate that the goal is, it's a FEMA, yeah.
On the right of entry form,
Yes.
that assigns the rights, can he modify that to limited to only debris removal?
So we ask that you don't modify the right of entry because that may invalidate it, but it already states that the intent is for the portion of your insurance that would cover debris removal. And just to make it very plain, there's a FEMA requirement. Basically, this program, it's only because of FEMA supporting a request that came from the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. They made a request to FEMA to say, will you reimburse us to implement this program that helps private property debris removal come through and clear this material out for the public health and safety? FEMA said, yes, we will do that, but we want to make sure if there's insurance that would have paid for debris removal, that it's not going to the resident, because this program is doing the debris removal. We don't want to have a duplication of benefits. That is the one and only reason why we're collecting any insurance revenue. So if there isn't a duplication of benefits, for example, if you're underinsured, if you use that insurance proceed for trees or fencing or other things that weren't covered, if you have no insurance at all, the program doesn't get any funding, and that's okay. If there's a duplication, we would cover just that portion that would have gone for debris removal and nothing else. We have a question back there.
Can we tell our insurance company that you can only pay out of this portion of our policy?
That's something you want to communicate with your insurance company. You're welcome to do that. There's so many different variations on insurance, and it's something that you should definitely be talking to your insurance adjuster and laying out, hey, I'm going to be participating in this program. Their goal is to get reimbursement for any debris removal. If you want to tell them, make sure that the program is only getting that debris removal portion, that helps make it clearer to them. We're going to be saying the same thing, and that's perfectly fine.
Is that something that from the Department of Insurance we could limit our insurance company?
And I'll be available afterwards if it's a specific question. But it sounds like, I mean, if you've got a policy that already specifies a percentage or an amount for debris removal, that's all that's ever going to be in potential even for the county to come to you and ask for reimbursement or to see how that money's been spent. That's the only money that's ever going to be in question. They're not going to be concerned or inquiring about the rebuild money, your coverage A, your coverage C limits. They're not going to be involved in that.
I guess I'm going to say one more thing about it, just because this is the part that really has me. When your coverage A policy is set up, your coverage A policy says that you don't get to your debris removal portion of your policy until you've exhausted coverage A. Okay? So that's one of the things I'm concerned about. So unless you exhaust your coverage A, in most of these policies, your debris removal portion is included until you exhaust.
Well, it depends on the policy. Most policies actually are a percentage, 5% or 10% of coverage A.
If your coverage A doesn't have enough to do it and build it all back.
Right. So again, the issue would be if your coverage A limits are X dollars, all of that, and the debris removal is 5% in addition of that amount, if you use all that to rebuild, then until you rebuild, there's nothing for the county to come and talk to you about. Does that make sense?
To say it another way, if your insurance says you haven't used all of A, we're not giving you any money for debris removal, that means we don't get any money, and that's fine.
What it kind of says is debris removal's in coverage A unless you exhaust.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So in that case, your policy language is, if I understand it correctly, debris removal is within coverage A. If coverage A is exhausted, there's an additional X% available for dedicated for debris removal. So in this context, until you've exhausted A, there's nothing, there's no debris removal there. There's no coverage there for the county to come talk to you about.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So your coverage A limits are dedicated to the rebuild.
There's $500,000 left in coverage A, and now that's what you guys are taking before the house is done. That's kind of the issue.
No. Yeah, and we could talk afterwards individually if you want, but that's not been our experience at all with this program.
Yeah. To say it another way, rebuilding is a first priority. If you have funding that's going to rebuilding, we want to use as much of that for the rebuilding, and we're going to wait until you're completely done. If there's anything remaining that would have gone to debris removal, we'll get that portion. If not, we won't get anything.
So one of the hard things to figure out if we're going to opt in with your option, rather the private option, is you won't give us any estimate of how much it's going to cost, so we can compare it to what a private person's going to charge, right? Because some people you're not going to take any money because if they don't have insurance, you're doing it for free, and some people have a lot of money, you might make more because you're doing it. So is there a general price? Like you showed us a bunch of houses that were all done, looked like regular lots, pretty consistent. What is a general place like that where it cost? So we can have something compared to whether we're getting a good deal or not.
I'll just say what we've heard from these past events, the ballpark figure, $70,000 to $110,000 per property. That's the total cost that we've seen. That includes additional activities that the state is doing. You know, the street sweepers, that cost is built into that figure. The air quality monitoring is built in that figure that your private contractor may not, because people hear that number and they think it's high. I will tell you though, you're going to be surprised by how much the private companies will charge you, assuming they're licensed contractors that are doing things properly, which we want to make sure everybody does get good contractors.
So if you're saying that your average price per lot's $100,000 to clear, I have 37 that's dedicated in my insurance for removal. You're only going to take 37. So
That's correct.
You're eating 50 grand or 70 grand.
Yep. This is exactly why we really encourage people to do this, because maybe you'll get a contractor that's half our price, $50,000. Right. That difference is now your responsibility versus if you opt in, we only take 37. The rest, even if it costs $200,000, the state is going to do that work and they'll make sure that it gets done right.
Great. Sign me up.
You know, one of the things that we've seen at the other places, and I'm a claims guy. I mean, that's what I've done for 30 years. Yeah, if my house burns down by itself, isolated, yeah, I can get that lot cleared for 40 grand. In these types of disasters where there's so much on the ground, I think Cal OES for the Thomas Fire spent like $1 million just monitoring the air for the Thomas Fire. My house burns down by itself, you're not going to have those types of expenses. That's why there's it's a different expense. They have to bring in traffic people to control the traffic. All of these things are wrapped, water's on them, they're tarped. It's a different animal compared to my house burns down by itself, isolated. That's part of the cost structure.
We live on part of a hillside, and we would like to make sure that a lot of our hillside remains after this process is over, and as little of the rest of the hillside is removed when you scrape off what you need to scrape off to remove contaminants. How do we make sure about that?
Well, once we do debris removal and we disturb any type of slopes, as part of our process, we also do some type of erosion control. So that's where we'll do like our hydro mulching, we put up wattles, and we do, depending on if we do disturb slopes, some kind of erosion control netting. So we do put those measures in place to kind of keep that in control when we...
What we don't want is a bunch that's taken away. We want the minimum amount of dirt removed. So it's nice that it's not going to erode more, but we'd like to limit it.
Of course, and so do we. We only take what we have to. We only take the part of the soil that had contamination on it. We don't want you to have to rebuild your hillside. So we start off by taking 3 to 6 inches of where there was a structure with debris. So if there is debris that's kind of scattered down the hillside, we don't take 3 to 6 inches of the whole entire hillside off. So if there's a large area where, like I said, a structure was, that's where we focus on, because that's where the majority of the contamination was, and it sat and it smoldered and it seeped into the ground. So we don't take the whole hillside off if there's just scattered debris down the hillside.
So you do that by hand?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. If a piece of equipment can't reach it, then we do it by hand.
I'm back again to now ask a question about the rain, because I'm pretty concerned that the rain is going to impact how this cleanup process happens and how long it will take. And I'm interested in hearing from previous fires and other experiences in terms of like whether this April deadline is a realistic one and accounts for these kind of road closures. We're up on Decker, and our road is getting closed a lot. So I'm just thinking the compelling reason to go for a private debris removal might be that I have more control over perhaps scheduling, like when those kinds of things happen. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how you're thinking and managing this process because of weather events that we're going to experience this winter.
Sure, of course. That's a very good question. So how we schedule our crews for the debris removal depends on multiple factors. One of them being where we have our right of entry forms. So that's another reason why it's so imperative for every resident to either opt in or opt out. Once we receive those right of entry forms, we look at where our properties are that are in our program and what the routes are to get from there to our landfills and what roads are going to be closed. We look at what roads have hazards or possibility of being closed. We can't promise that we will be done by the end of April. We can't make that promise because, as we all know, things happen. There are mudslides, entire portions of PCH get closed for months on end. So there's always that environmental factor, the human factor that comes into it. What we're telling you is that we're going to do our very best to get this cleaned up as efficiently and as quickly as possible to make sure that you guys can get back to your rebuilding as quickly as possible.
Thank
I hope
you.
that helps answer your question.
Thank you. That does help. And I'm just wondering, because I know people who would like to be able to have their property cleared so that they can have a temporary housing structure built on that. Is that part of the decision-making matrix for who gets their property cleared as well, or that is just independent and not factored into that?
If we have people that come to us and let us know we would like that, we do what we can to try to work with people. I can't make any promises, again, because of us trying to be as efficient as possible. If we have crews coming in to work and we're able to, we make a plan, our plans chief and their team creates a plan of where we can put the crews to be as efficient as possible so that we get as many properties cleaned in as timely manner as we can. And we do try to work with people that know that they're coming back and they want to move back in right at that point. But like I said, we can't, if we have our crews moving all around the county from this street to the next street to the next, as opposed to just say going down the street, it's going to take much longer for everyone to have their properties cleared. So that being said, we don't, when it comes to planning, we try to strategically place our crews all over the county. We don't just start on one side and work north to south or east to west. We place them all over in all the cities and the north side, the south side, the east side, the west side of the county, so that we try to touch every area the same, so that every area hopefully gets cleaned up simultaneously. And there are, sorry? Yeah, so within the first week, we do plan to have 15 crews by the end of, so the contractor is going to start on the 28th, and by the end of their first week, we do expect them to have 15 crews, and we could be up to 50, depending on how many right of entry forms we get and how close those properties are together. Obviously, we have to make sure that it's safe for not only the people who are working, but the community around. If there are still residents in the area, we got to make sure that there aren't too many trucks or too much heavy equipment in one area, so that you all can still move around and be safe as well.
Thank you. I was listening and thinking about considerations that someone might have if they have a dump truck, coming onto their property to do the debris removal. Does that generally impact someone's driveway because of the weight of that? And is that going to be like another consideration?
I mean, unfortunately, that is the case. We do take we do our very best not to disturb anything more than it already is, but sometimes we have had incidents where driveways do potentially get ruined, and we're used to rural areas too, so private driveways, things like that, we can do our best to use base rock and try and patch things up as best we can, but like I said, we do our best to try and lessen the impact that we have on this cleanup.
Okay. And I just want to just reiterate, I know it sounds like we're saying we do our best, we do our best, we do our best. We are here to try to make your lives better, not make it worse. So everything that we can do, there are parameters of what our program entail, but we are here to help you. So anything that we can do on an individual basis that helps keep but it still helps keep the process moving, so it's quickly done for everyone. We do try to do those things. And so I know it sounds like we're not putting a caveat on every question you're asking, but we do try to do our best to accommodate each individual homeowner, with also keeping in mind that there are several hundred other homeowners as well that we're also trying to make sure this is done quickly for.
And then, sorry, so any damage we do to the property, because we have made mistakes before, we've messed up someone's well, we've done a driveway. At the D-Rock, we will have a form that you can fill out. It's a damage waiver. So just fill that out, and our crew goes and takes a look at it, and we see what we can do to kind of fix those issues that happen during the removal, because stuff will happen, unfortunately, and we'll do our best to mitigate that.
Thank you.
Because this is an issue that has come up before, and I think the best way that it was conveyed is the goal is to make sure that you have access to your property at the end of this. So if there was a crack in your driveway and the equipment, it's heavy equipment, it might make that crack a little bit bigger. That you might have to live with. But if there's significant damage and you're no longer able to access your property, the contractors will make sure that they go back out and they repair that. Same thing, if there's damage to your well or to your septic system, make sure that you fill out that form, they'll go back and they'll make sure that those are repaired.
In our situation, we have a driveway that was replaced, and when they did it, it's really substandard. It's like 3.5 inches welded wire mesh. It's not going to handle any equipment going down it, but it's only 6 months old. So, when we saw them doing that, we realized we weren't going to be able to use it even for pumping our septic tank. But this is what the access is to our guest houses, which are down the hill past the house. In that situation, it's almost guaranteed. What would you recommend? We know this ahead of time, but it's basically in the failure of lawsuit, neighbors, crossing property lines, easements, stuff like that.
And I mean,
Yeah.
and I feel bad now that Kendra said it because, I mean, I'm going to, again, say we do our best, but what it comes down to, too, is when we actually go to try and mobilize equipment, we do try and find easier routes to mobilize this stuff because, I mean, it's a heavy excavator with metal tracks, so
Sure, yeah.
we want to do our very best not to damage your nice driveway or patio. So if there's a way we can go up a hillside, like I've seen them go up hillsides before just to avoid, because I'm sure you'd rather have damage to like a grassy area rather than your whole driveway. So those things we do take into consideration, and we kind of evaluate that before we actually mobilize any type of heavy equipment or trucks.
Sure, if it turns out it was made out of gold leaf, and you really shouldn't, go over it with anything more than a bicycle, but it's the only way to get there. What do you guys do in that situation? I mean, that would be my description of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's situational.
Just have to work out with the neighbor, say, hey, this is our access, it's gonna get ruined.
We have, and can we talk about access ROEs in this case? So in this case, yeah, if there are easier entrances for our equipment to move through, but I'm just saying if there is, neighbors and stuff like that, there is an access ROE we have where they can fill out and we can send equipment through their area if it makes it easier to get to.
Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't exist, so I guess.
If you want, I mean, I can come take a look and we can evaluate it together. So that's what I do. I like being out in the field, so any chance. So if you want me to come out and meet you, I'd be happy to come out and we can take a look and figure things out. So we could talk after the. Oh, and sorry, as long as you have your right of entry form, of course. So let me. Is that part of the access part? Or, yeah, so the access ROE, it's for the actual property owner. So if someone's renting, then we do need to make that clear that it's the actual property owner of that area we'd be mobilizing through. But and add to it if you.
Yeah, so we've come across some properties where you have to go through a neighbor's property to access your property. We need to have an access ROE from that property owner as well. If we don't get that, it's a possibility we'll not be able to clear your property, even if you've submitted an ROE. So communicate with your property owner early, your neighbors.
What if you're on a private road or by an HOA?
Yeah, so that's a similar thing. We'll probably need an access ROE from the HOA, depending on how it's structured. And sometimes each of the owners have partial ownership of the private road. Sometimes it's one corporation that owns that private road. So it's case by case. Generally, private roads have not been as much of an issue as if there's a literal easement that's owned by a different property owner that you have to go through in order to access a secondary property.
Yeah, the HOA has an easement over everything for the road. So
Okay.
something they would sign?
Yes, if needed. And I think usually if there's an easement, you guys can just use that easement, right? Yeah. Generally, if there's an easement and it's allowing all the property owners access, then the contractor would have that same right of access. Another question back there?
I heard a kind of a scary name for a form called damage waiver. I mean, with what we sign it and we waive all claims against you?
No, it's just we call it a damage claim form, but usually how that comes into play is if we do some type of damage to your property during the removal. So like we said, like if we bust a well or if we damage any of your septic, like this is a form that you can fill out and give to us, and then we evaluate it, and it's our way of the contractor having to come and like fix those issues that we caused during the removal. So it's our way of trying not to, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Exactly. It's our way of documenting and trying to make it as inconvenient as possible for you guys. So.
Does our insurance, if it's a regular California form, cover liability of, like if the contractor has somebody injured, or there's some other, or one of your crews wrecks another property, or just does something for which we might be liable in a private way?
The right of entry form actually addresses the issues of liability, et cetera. Your personal policy would be in play generally, depending on how the policy is written. This standard ISO policy will cover liability for which you, damages for which you'd be legally liable. If the contractors are out on your property and something happens, that's generally speaking not going to be liability that would accrue to you.
It could.
It generally would not be liability that would accrue to you.
And if we have occasional workman's comp type coverage, that wouldn't apply if somebody got injured.
It wouldn't, it applies because you're covered. It would not be accessed because it would be the work comp of the contractor. Because this would not be incidental work comp.
And if there's a claim, or if there's a damage to a third party caused by your contractors, presumably they have insurance, and if there's a dispute about whether their insurance covers it or the county or FEMA covers it, I mean, basically, we don't have to worry about it, right?
I wouldn't be concerned, and the language of the ROE is pretty clear on that, but you know, I live in Ventura County. I've been evacuated multiple times. I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Any other questions?
Who actually supervises? Is it a county person or a FEMA person? Who supervises? Sounds like you actually hire private contractors to do this work. It's not county employees. So who controls what's going on, and who has the power over those, you know, the people on your property?
So we run under an ICS structure, so incident command system. So Kendra, she's our incident commander for the operation. Below her is a deputy, and then below that we have our operations chief, which is me, and a plans chief, and then we have the consultants and contractors. So we're basically the overseeing agencies on this.
So these are our state partners, and county staff is at the DROC as well. We have several county staff that are there working hand in hand with the state and with the contractors. Okay. I think we've exhausted all the questions. I do just want to thank all of you for coming out. We're going to continue to be at the table, so if you have questions, SBA is here. We have Cal OES, Public Works, City of Malibu, other tables there. Please do come make sure that all your questions are answered, and thank you again.